Family ties, love, loss, hope. 1. Tasia Nilova lived in the village. Her life was no different from that of other village girls who tried to leave the village after finishing school. In the district center, where she lived with relatives, Tasia, after graduating from school, received the profession of a fourth-class cook. She married the first guy she met, not because she loved him, but because it was customary in their village. If you meet a guy, then you have to get married. Besides, there was no one to choose from, because the cavaliers did not pay attention to her. She considered herself plain, short, with short, plump legs, big hands that had been used to hard work since childhood, with a face covered in freckles. Only her brown eyes stood out in her face. Ivan, whom she met at the graduation party, also graduated from high school and became a turner. He lived with his parents and 2 younger brothers in a small private house on the outskirts of a working-class village. Therefore, Tasia and Ivan were glad when they received a dorm room from the factory. She, in the factory canteen, he, in the tool shop. They lived together for 10 years, had a son and a daughter, and got a 2-bedroom apartment. It would seem that what else can you ask for? Some of Tassie's friends even envied her, but she herself felt empty, dissatisfied, and indifferent to her husband. When Ivan announced that he was leaving for another woman, she felt no resentment or pain, took it calmly, without emotions, and continued to live by inertia. One Friday morning, early before work, she received a phone call from relatives in the area telling her that her mother was seriously ill. Tasia instructed the children, 12-year-old Tanya and 10-year-old Sasha, how to behave, what to eat, when to go to bed, and asked her shift worker to go to work instead of her. Then she hurried to her mother's side. It was September. Everyone was looking forward to Indian summer, but for several days it had been raining, a nasty little rain, accompanied by cold gusts of wind. Tasia walked along the broken road for almost 3 kilometers to her native village, past a long untilled field overgrown with weeds, past an abandoned collective farm garden, past an empty farm, past sagging and deserted houses. The village seemed to be rapidly falling into disrepair. As she splashed mud over herself and stared at the bleak landscape around her, the lines of a poem she had read in the local newspaper the day before came back to her. What happened to the village? She's dying. Why doesn't anyone care about her? The old mother also lets her sons go. It's obvious that she overlooked something in their lives. They didn't return until they left for the city, they started families and lived differently. Their ingrown roots were cut off in the village. They are not drawn back, their hearts do not call. Tassa felt ashamed of her involvement in this desolation. She shivered and pushed open the creaking door of her home. The next morning was surprisingly dry and sunny. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Tasia asked without getting out of bed. "The slushy day has passed away, and I feel better, my daughter," Maria Nikaitikna replied in a cheerful voice. A 70-year-old woman who had lived in the country all her life, worked on a collective farm, and raised 3 children, now passed her time alone. The arrival of her daughter, of course, cheered her up. Tasia stretched, got out of bed, and felt light all over. In her heart, she felt a kind of carefree feeling, like in her distant youth. Maybe this sunny day will bring me happiness? The young woman thought dreamily as she lit the stove. 40 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. "It's open," Tasia said. A young man was standing in the doorway. Tasia was surprised. Who is he? Where did such a handsome man come from? A blonde, slightly wavy forelock fell over a high forehead. Eyebrows like 2 delicate feathers, scattered. Straight nose, firm lips and strong chin. Tall, toned figure. Like a cartoon character in the Bremen Town Musicians, the woman thought, and did not hesitate to look directly at the early guest. "Who are you?" Tasia finally managed to control herself. "I am the son of Aunt Nayora, a neighbor of your family. My mother sent me to ask about Baba Mash's health. Are you the Vitek who as a teenager galloped around the village on collective farm horses? And your Aunt Tasia? What an aunt I am to you. Only about 10 years older than you, with a small ponytail," the woman said in annoyance, looking straight into your eyes. She flexed her shoulders, straining her already high chest, and lifted her head higher. "You see, the sun rises easily, Indian summer begins. So my mother felt better. And you and Aunt Nayora come call for lunch, I'll bake pies." "We'll come," Victor simply replied and stepped out the door. Without knowing why, Toshino's mood improved dramatically. The energy was bubbling with a hot spring. With household chores, she coped quickly. She put things in order in the house, baked pies, cooked cabbage soup, compote, stewed potatoes, washed clothes at the same time and hummed loudly at the same time. Tasia made her mother put on a new blouse and skirt that she had given her for the 8th of March. But why, daughter? What holiday? It's been a long time since she's been in such a mood, Maria Nikitokna said in surprise. But the guests will be here soon. You can't meet them in their dressing gowns, Tasia answered cheerfully, putting on a black knitted sundress and a thin beige sweater, wishing she had brought a white lace blouse with her, which is very refreshing and young. Tasia had just put on a little powder and a touch of pink lipstick when there was a knock on the door. Come in, Maria Nikitokna invited the neighbors, breaking into a smile. She caught her daughter's cheerful mood. Where did the disease go? She rejoiced. We'd love to. Nice to see you, Nikitokna, in perfect health. We'll have a glass of wine for that, Anna Ivanovna said, putting a bottle of wine on the table. Sit down, everything is ready, the young hostess bustled, taking crystal glasses out of the sideboard. To relieve some of Victor's embarrassment, she asked, "Oh, what kind of wine?" Red grape, Victor said, sitting down at the table. Tasia was glowing all over. Her face was transformed. It looked younger, more attractive, and its eyes shone like two hot coals. She straightened her back and raised her head, making her look taller. Tassa liked the feeling of it, too. She had never felt so at ease, free, and confident. What's the matter with her? The mother wondered, glancing at her daughter from time to time. At the table, they talked about everyday things, about the past summer, about the upcoming winter, about the dying village. So Victor broke out of his long-term service. He listened to my loneliness. What's there to watch over me in the village? You need to decide on a job, arrange your life, Victor's mother lamented. Don't worry so much, Ivanovna. There he is, how bold and handsome he is. He'll find a job and find a wife, Nikitokna reassured her. What little girls they are now, they're probably all twitchy. It's hard to find an independent one in a household one, Ivanovna continued to worry about her son. And where to go to work? You know there's nothing to do here. There are no relatives in the city to live here for the first time. Why go to the city? Come on, Victor, to our work settlement. And we have a good factory, and a technical school attached to it. You will work and learn. I have a 2-room apartment you can stay with me for now, Tasia suggested. Victor hung his head and was silent, pondering the unexpected offer. Everyone was waiting for an answer. What do you say to that, son? Victor's mother broke down. If you really don't mind, Taisia Sergeevna, Victor looked Tassa straight in the eye, pausing for a moment, then I agree. We'll raise another glass for this settled question, Nikitokna said cheerfully. Pour it, Vitek. 2. Throwing a couple of shirts and a change of underwear into his backpack, Victor was ready to go and make his life better. 2 lonely old ladies stood for a long time on the highway, overgrown with burnt grass ants, and Tasia and Victor easily walked to the highway. We arrived home in the evening. Tasia introduced the children to Victor, saying that Uncle Vitya was their grandmother's neighbor and that he would live in their apartment for the time being. Having seated the children and Victor at the kitchen table, the hostess noisily complained about the tightness. What is the project of the house? Who came up with it? A 2-bedroom apartment requires more than 2 tenants. And the kitchen is only 6 square meters. How do I fit in here? Mom, you always said that in a tight place, but not an offense, put in his remark son Sasha. Victor, finishing his tea, looked carefully at Sasha, then at Tanya, who was clearly embarrassed. Tanyush, Sashok, am I going to be a real nuisance with my presence? Tanya blushed and said nothing, and the more sociable Sasha immediately gave an answer. No, Uncle Vit. There are 2 of us men now, and it's too hard for me among the female sex. I don't even have anyone to go to football with. Everyone burst out laughing, except Tanyushka. Go to bed, men. Tasia said deliberately loudly. Tanyush, please wash the dishes. With a slight limp, Tanya bustled around the table. Maybe it was the slight limp she received at birth that caused her to be reserved and silent both in the family and at school. Victor, I'll make you a bed on the couch in the hall. Thank you, Taisia Sergeevna. I'm in your debt. Well, we agreed. Don't make an old woman out of me. You and I are on the same page, and call me by my first name like I'm your big sister. Okay? Tasia sparkled with a smile. And all the reddish hairs on her nose and cheeks shone like little lights. All right, Victor said without embarrassment. And looking at Taysa, I was surprised that a face with freckles can be so attractive. The next day, Sunday, right after breakfast, everyone went to the dacha, which was a 20-minute walk away. We walked through the golden purple forest and silently enjoyed the splash of Indian summer warmth and sun. Yellow, red, and here and there green carved maple leaves especially fascinated the eye. A mischievous breeze kept blowing the thinnest cobwebs on his face or throwing an obsolete yellow birch leaf over his shoulders. Looking at all this beauty, Tasia felt how passionately she wanted to live and love, how much the soul requires affection. What a beauty, she said enthusiastically. Yes, very well, Victor said thoughtfully. I'm going to work the second shift tomorrow, so I'll help you find the plant's human resources department and technical school. A month has passed. Victor got a job. I was also lucky with my admission to school. Tassie's soul was in turmoil. Intellectually, she knew that Victor wasn't a match for her at all, that she should only think of him as a younger brother at best. But my heart wouldn't listen. Tasia kept catching herself admiring Victor as a man. She wants to stroke his blonde hair, look into his blue eyes. She wished he would just casually put his arm around her. As she washed Victor's clothes with pleasure, Tasia secretly held his shirt to her chest and enjoyed the smell of his young, healthy body. Tassie had an overwhelming urge to look her best. She had updated her wardrobe. New dresses appeared in the chiffonier, underwear became more sophisticated, she bought a new autumn coat and boots, a new blue housecoat refreshed her face favorably. Now she didn't allow herself to go out without turning around in front of the mirror and thoroughly cleaning herself up. Tasia became talkative, often laughing at nothing. The children liked the light atmosphere in the house. Victor and the children became friends. They often talked about school affairs, and Sasha especially liked to talk about football and hockey. Victor was attracted to such a family environment. He was happy to help Taysa with household chores, communicate with children, and prepare for classes at the technical school. Taysa's change of mood was noticed at work. "Thace, you're not in love, are you?" repeatedly asked her a question. "And if it is?" "No," she said playfully. Once Tasia was late at work. They were celebrating the birthday of one of the cooks, Tony Pavlenko. Flushed, either from the champagne she'd drunk or from the December frost, she crossed the threshold of the apartment, trying not to make any noise. The floating hands of the digital clock in the hallway showed 11:30 in the morning. She shrugged out of her mouton fur coat and opened the door to the nursery, where the children were fast asleep. The door to the hall was open. Barely breathing, Tasia tiptoed over to the couch to straighten the blanket that had fallen to the floor. Suddenly Victor opened his eyes, wrapped both arms around the woman's shoulders, and pulled her to him, burying his face in her ample breasts. Tassie's mind was a little fuzzy. Unable to hold back the rush of tenderness, she cupped his head, stroking his hair and kissing the top of his head. Victor gently pushed the woman away, jumped up from the sofa, easily picked her up in his arms and carried her to the bedroom. Hot were the kisses, embraces, and caresses of the unspent strength of a young man and a woman who had longed for a man's body and had never known passionate love before. From that night Tasia and Victor became close friends. Happiness, love and passion overwhelmed the woman. After a month, she felt a change in herself. "I waited another week and realized that I was pregnant. To tell or not to tell Victor? What to do? Tell them," Tasia decided. "Let him decide for himself. I don't claim anything. Why are you so thoughtful today?" Victor asked, settling himself more comfortably in bed and pulling Taysa's head towards him. After a moment's silence, as if considering how and what to say, Tasia finally said, "I think I'm pregnant." Don't think I didn't do it on purpose, she hurried on, "I don't pretend to anything." Victor smiled and patted Taysa's head. "I am glad. Tomorrow we will take the application to the registry office. Then, someday, whenever you want, you can be free," Tasia said. "In the meantime, look only at me." She gently kissed Victor's eyes and, kissing the corners of his lips, continued, "Kiss only me." Victor silently kissed Taysa on the lips. Having learned about the intention of their mother and Victor to get married, the children took this news in different ways. Sasha exclaimed approvingly, Great, Tanya silently looked at her mother with her big brown eyes, in which there was both bewilderment and an unasked question. Tasa's work colleagues and neighbors gossiped about it, each from his own bell tower. Some condemned, others envied, and still others sincerely rejoiced. Tassie had the same answer for everyone. As long as God gives me happiness, I will enjoy it. At the end of September, Tassie and Victor had a daughter. Victor called her Marina. He was happy to walk with her on the street, helped the girl bathe, did not shy away from any homework. Tasia thanked God for her happiness and cherished it. Her whole life was subordinated to ensuring that everyone in the family was comfortable. Especially my husband. 10 cloudless years have passed. Over the years, Victor graduated from the technical school and began working as a tool shop master. Then he studied in absentia at the Machine Building Institute of Moscow. After passing the state examinations, he was offered the position of shop manager. The former retired. With a salesman's diploma after a cooperative technical school, Tanya was hired in a grocery store. Sasha, having received a matriculation certificate of secondary education, graduated from a driving school and joined the army. Marinachka, a long-legged girl, a beauty, very similar in appearance to her father, studied successfully at school. Well, Tasia still worked in the factory canteen, but already as a 6th-class cook. That autumn morning didn't bode well for Tasa. Lunch in the canteen was almost over. Tasia received food in the food store the next day. Suddenly, Maria, who was working at the lunch counter, came running in. "Thais," she began in a rapid patter, "you know that I am alone at the first and second hand today. I'm tired, I don't have the strength, I can't cope, please help me. I'll just change my dressing gown and cap," she said to Maria, who was already running away. When serving dishes to the factory workers, Tasia no, and look at the hall where the customers are having lunch.
And suddenly, she saw her husband.